Welcome back to this tutorial. Now it's time to join into a new level. Buildbox 3 is ready and it is very cool. I show you how it works and then you can make your own games in 3D. This is how it looks inside of Buildbox 3. On the left on top we have the select tool and we can select any object with it. And when hit Control we can select more objects. Then we have the Move tool, and when we have selected an object or more objects, we can move them around the X, the Y and the Z axis. And we can do this with all the objects we have in our scene. With the Rotate tool, we can rotate every object around all the axes. Here we have this wheel and here we can choose between all the three axes. And when hit Control, we can select more objects and rotate them. And with the Scale tool, we can easily scale every selected object around a Y and Z axis. And when hit Control, we can select more objects and scale them. And with the Multi-Select tool, we can do cool because we can move, rotate, and we can scale every selected object. Pretty cool. And when hit Control objects, and then we can move, rotate and scale them. When hit space on the keyboard and the left mouse button, we can move around in our scene. And when hit space and the right button on the mouse, we can rotate around. And with the mouse wheel, we can zoom in and zoom out. Here on top on the right side we can turn on the camera view and we can zoom in and zoom out. We can move around with space and the left mouse button. or we can rotate with space and the right mouse button. And here we can change the local axis when it is turned off and when we rotate our object, and then we want to scale or move our object, the axis doesn't change. And then when we turn on the local axis, all the axes are moved around with the object. And then we have the collision shape editor. Now when we move around the arrows, only the collision shape is moving around. Same thing with the scale tool. We can scale down or up the collision shape around all the axes. And here we can switch into the two-dimensional mode to make a two-dimensional game. And same here, we can move around with space and the left mouse button. But now we can't rotate because we have only 2 dimensions. And the same we can do with the camera view in two-dimensional mode. With the local axis we can only move, rotate and scale around of 2 axes. And we can add the collision shape very easy in the two-dimensional mode because we can see very good where's the shape. Here on top we have the preview mode. And let's go back to the 3D mode. When we're playing our game, then we can refresh the preview mode with this button. And the log file, this area is only for coders. We don't need, but we can write some code in Buildbox 3, and here we can check for errors and bugs. And with this button we can make screenshots for the app stores or to share somewhere. And here we can check the collision shape when we're playing our game in the debug mode. And the camera view isn't correct now. Let's go to the start scene and move it around a little bit with space and the left mouse button. Now it looks okay. And with the other button, we can always make a preview from the selected scene. The character. The collision group must be always on character. And here we can turn on the physics, the speed for every axis, and when using a trail, We can change the texture here. On 3D model we can change the mesh type, or we can use our own OBJ files. Here we can change the color. And here we can use a texture. With the enemy is the same thing. Mesh, color, texture. And the collision group must be always at enemy. A platform where our character is walking on it must have platform as collision group. If you want to have a platform that kills the character when he collides with it, then change the collision group as an enemy. On top, on edit, we can choose between align scenes and randomize scenes. Randomized scenes, it works great for endless runner games because all the scenes will be mixed and played by random. And align scenes we choose when we have a strict structure and it will start a new scene when the last scene ends. When adding or deleting scenes we always have to click on align scenes again. When we select a scene and with D we can duplicate the scene and then we can change the name. That makes sense when we have objects in a scene and we need them in a new scene. And when we need a blank scene, then we click on add a new scene. The mind map shows all the UI nodes in our game. And on the left side is the input and on the right side is the output. For example, the start UI with the option to click the start button will start the first level in the game. And the world is connected with the game UI, and this UI is to control our character, and also when the player dies with the game over UI. The world is also connected with the world complete UI when the player finished the world. Is selected and with D we can duplicate the UI. With the right mouse button we can add new UIs to the game. And when we select a UI we can adding some music to every UI. For example, the game UI is for everything that affects the world. And the music we choose there will be played in the game. If we have only one game UI and we use it for all the other worlds, then it plays the same music in each world. If we want different music in the other worlds, then we need a different game UI for each world. In Buildbox we use MP3 files that can be dropped inside here and we can loop the music. And I think we also want to make some money with our games. Then we can choose between different types of promotional ads in each UI. The banner ad is just a little banner on top or on the button, for example when the player finishes the world or when the player dies. And the interstitial is an ad that shows on the full screen. For banner and interstitial we can use a banner frequency. One that means, for example, when the player dies it always shows an ad. If we change it into 3, the player can die for 2 times without showing any ads, and he dies for the 3rd time, the ad shows up. Now have a look inside of a world UI. We have gravity for all the axes. -50, that means that our character will be pushed more stronger down to the ground. Next scene threshold, that means that as higher the number, as much earlier the next scenes are loading. And deleting threshold, that means that as higher the number, as later the last scene before will be deleted. You just have to check it out. And what is really cool, we can adding fog in our game. You just have to play around with it. As lower the number from fog distance, as closer is the fog. And as lower the end distance, as less we see, because it covers much stronger the character. The grid size is helpful for orientation when we create our levels. We go into the world UI and we can change the grid size for all the axes. And then we have physics. Just play around with it to see how physics affecting the gameplay. On this area we have the outliner. And the outliner shows for every scene the objects we use. On this eye symbol we can make all the objects we have invisible. And with the lock symbol we have every object and we can't move them around as long as it is locked. We can easily connect 2 or more objects. Let me show you an example. We use a point light and move it above our character. The intensity much higher and a yellow color. And in the outliner we drop the point light in the character. And now the light is connected with the character. Let's make a preview in 3D mode. I want to see. And now the light is following the character. This effect we can use, for example, in a dark cave or in a castle or in something like in the night. And another very cool thing is we can add a scene part to create streets or ramps. The scene part moves along from the start point to the end point in our scene. Let me lock the ground object. And here we can move. With the rotate tool we can rotate the path and we can scale the scene path. The light sun is the light that we use to give our game a nice atmosphere. Shadow distance is the distance from the object and the shadow. And the shadow intensity is the strength from the color of the shadow. We can also change the light color, the intensity, and the ambient color. Just play around with it. We can add different fonts to our game, and we click on the font editor and then we add a new font. Here in the list we can see all the fonts we have installed on our computer. Okay, this looks pretty good, and now let's name it tutorial font. And here we can change the font size, the padding, just play around with it, and here we can change the main color. Okay. And here we can draw a stroke around with another color. Here's a stroke. We also can use a gradient color. And a shadow. And here we can change the offset from the shadow in X and Y direction. We can use labels in our game to give some hints to the player, or when we have points or coins on top of the screen, we can use it there. I show you an example, but first I delete the path. And then we go to Mind Map and the game UI. and there is already a label that counts the points we collected. And here the function is on score. It counts in every world. Score type, we can use points or coins. Amount, we can choose between current, best or total. Current, that means it always starts counting from 0 and up in every new world. Total or best we can use in coin shops, for example. On stick to edge, that means that all the objects are in that case a font when they are very close to the edge. Auto hide we can use for font labels to show them only a few seconds. 0 is never hiding, and if we use 3, then the font is hiding after 3 seconds. And now let's drop in a new label, and here we can use our tutorial label. Here we can fill in something like total. Tutorial font and stick to edge. And I see there is another layer, a shader. We can lock this. We can move it around a little bit and make a preview. And that looks already pretty cool. I see that our character is a little bit lost because of our test, but is no problem. See, he's out of the path. And when we shrink that window a little bit down, then we can place the preview window on the other side, and when the game is running, we can adjust the label in real time. But it already looks pretty good there. The project settings are very important when our game is ready to export. Here we must drop in the picture that shows on the mobile devices, and here also a working title. At score type we have to choose between distance, coins collected, points collected, global distance, global coins and global points. We want to place a button to get the player to share the game with friends. Game field screen or game over screen. Screen adjustment, we can choose fit to height, fit to width or auto. Reset message when the player wants to reset the game. And another message when the player hasn't enough currency to buy. And here we choose the App Store where we want to export our game. Bundle ID, Leaderboard ID. I will show you in another detailed video. And here we can fill in a share message when sharing the game. Name on device and a review link. The orientation, portrait or landscape. Then the game version, and for every update we want to export we have to change the game version here. description. Yes, check that, and nobody can rip off your game files. Near render distance and fast render distance we can change here. This is something I will show you in another tutorial. And here we can integrate multiple SDKs for advertisements to track and analyze our game when we use Facebook ads to promote our game, for example. And now let's go to the asset library. These are the shapes that we can drop into the workspace to use. Just drop it in and wait a few seconds and you can use it in your game. And then these are the smart assets. These are pretty cool pre-selected assets we can use as character, enemies and game assets. Just hover above with the mouse to get a preview. Just play around with them, that makes it a lot of fun. And in my next tutorial I show you how we can use our own game assets. And here on the bottom, on the left side, we have this amazing helper tool. When we click there, then we can hover above every item in the Buildbox platform to see some informations in the helper window what we can do with this item. I think this is really great. Now we're done and you're prepared to start. The link for getting Buildbox for free you find in the video description. Just check it out and try it as long as you want. In my next tutorial we will start to make a 3D game with my own game assets without coding. If you found this tutorial was helpful, give it a like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.